Hello and welcome to the League of Women Voters White Bear Lake Area Forum for candidates for Minnesota Senate in District 42. I'm Mary Santee. I live outside District 42 in White Bear Township. I will be moderating. This forum is not open to the public and is not being live streamed. The reason for this is to ensure we don't have interruption of the cable. It is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel, League of Women Voters White Bear Lake Area, and also the Roseville YouTube channel. Also, cable stations will replay this on their own schedule. So candidates, if for some reason you get bumped off of your connection, please call back and we'll make up your time. It hasn't happened yet, but who knows, it could. League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, trusted volunteer organization that encourages citizens to take part in their government. Our mission is to support voters' education and voter rights. While the League studies and takes positions on issues, we do not support or oppose any candidate or any political party. The goal of our forums is to let voters learn more about the candidates and what positions they have on the issues that will be on the ballot and on November 3rd. All candidates were invited to this forum and all candidates are here, and they are Jason Isaacson and Ben Schwanke. Candidates will give opening statements. I guess you have a minute and a half to open in alphabetical order. After that, the beginning speaker will rotate back and forth for each question, and then the closing statements will go in reverse alphabetical order. We have a timer who will show a card when you have 15 seconds, and then another card that says stop, and you may finish your sentence. No need to stop mid-word. So we'll start the questions with the opening statements with Jason Isaacson. You may begin.
Well, there we go. Well, I teach this and you think I would do okay on Zoom, right? Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm always appreciative of the good work League of Women Voters do on behalf of our democracy and getting the message out. And it's just so important, and I really appreciate that. My name is Jason Isaacson. I'm finishing my first term in the state Senate. I'm a DFLer. I'm a family man. My wife Cynthia and I have three amazing kids, Ivor, Owen, and Esme. They're 7, 5, and 4. So it's been a handful doing distance learning with our three kids this fall, but it's been really rewarding, and we're really enjoying the time with our family. As a senator, my focus has been on education, jobs, healthcare. I'm concerned about making sure that we fully fund and take care of our schools and provide our schools with all they need to be successful. I'm really worried about our economy, and I want to make sure that we provide an environment that has good paying jobs so families can afford to make the living they want to make and have the life they want to live. And I'm concerned about healthcare for all Minnesotans, and I want to make sure that that is not a barrier for our Minnesotans to find success and happiness in the middle class. And so my campaign is really centered on those 3 points. Among a million other things you learn at the Senate when you're there. It's kind of like getting your master's degree in a million different things. So I really enjoy being a senator. It's an honor and a privilege to serve you, and I'd love to earn your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Ben Schwanke. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Yep. Awesome. Yes, and thank you guys once again for putting this on. Just as Senator Isaacson said too, especially in the day and age of COVID and trying to make all this work, all the work that you guys put into this, I cannot imagine what you had to do to figure out all the rules. So thank you for still making this happen. As she said, my name is Ben Schwanke. I live in Roseville and have been a resident there for a little while now. And I also volunteer on the Shoreview Human Rights Commission there. Professionally, I teach 7th and 8th grade math for the Roseville Area School District. And I've also, for most of my time there, I've been either a football coach or also coaching girls basketball there too. I also serve my local union by being a members' rights advocate, serving on our exec board, and also as a contract negotiator. Also for the statewide, I also serve on the Education Minnesota Governing Board too, making sure I bring our district voices to the state level as we continue to work as one union. The reason why I am running for state senate here is really just to change the conversation that we are having. Too often it seems like it's either a red or a blue issue, a left or a right, and we've really got to start to come together in order to make any of this work. And so my goal as your state senator would be to change the conversation, get working together again, and make sure that the partisan bickering stops and actually we start to work together once again so that both the rural and the metro can continue to prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll now turn to questions, and we'll rotate the questions. They were submitted by the public on our website, and I will indicate who is to speak first and second. And after both candidates have had a chance to answer, you may have a rebuttal to 1 minute following that time. So to begin, Ben Schwanke, there are predictions of a large state budget deficit due to the pandemic. How will you prioritize what state government does in 2021 for people who have lost their jobs or impacted some way by the pandemic?
You know, I think that's the question that so many people are wanting to answers to right now. There's so much uncertainty coming forward and coming out of COVID, whenever that may be, that people want to know that they are going to have some economic certainty and that our community is going to continue to thrive after this. We luck out in this district and have so many mom and pop shops and large businesses here. And what the Senate needs to do is make sure that those businesses are able to continue on and continue to thrive. We can't have a stagnant economy coming out of this, and we need to make sure that the business climate is readily available for them to come out of this and boom and really take off. Because they're going to be the employers for everybody here. Like you said, we want good jobs, we want good paying jobs, and that's what our business community is going to have to do, and that's what they're going to have to do in order for all sectors of Minnesota to thrive. Without our business communities and our Main Street workers, we don't have the tax base in order to fund programs like education, other healthcare initiatives, or our roads and transportation. And so that would be one of my main goals, is like you said, is making sure our business climate is really set and ready to go. Along with that, I think this is where we need somebody like with my expertise who's negotiated different contracts to make sure that we are able to do it under the budget and that all sides are as satisfied as they can be. Thank you.
So Jason Isaacson.
And so that was asking how would we prioritize the state agenda amidst this COVID crisis and coming out of it. And did I get the question right?
Yes.
Okay. Ben has got a really good point there about the business and economy. In this 2 special sessions ago, I was a co-author of a bill that passed $62 million to help our mom and pop Main Street businesses, because I think that's absolutely essential to being successful. And I think that, creating a business climate, understanding how to keep and maintain businesses here in Minnesota is really important. I think that's an important piece of the pie. However, we're going to have to look at spiraling healthcare costs. We're going to have to look at what could be rampant unemployment and a pretty large deficit. And really, we got to prioritize what are our values here in Minnesota. And our values are based on education, the environment, treating each other fairly, quality healthcare. And those are the kind of priorities we're going to have to look at and make some really tough decisions when it comes to the next biennium, assuming the deficit continues along the path that it is, and making good choices that reflect the values of Minnesota. For me and for our district, we have an amazing group of school districts. The one Ben teaches in is awesome. White Bear is awesome, and Mounds View is amazing. And those 3 school districts do a good job, and we need to make sure they're funded to the extent they need to be to continue being a top tier school district. And so for me, it's really focusing on education, holding up and helping our economy, and then also prioritizing healthcare so people can come out of this crisis whole again.
Thank you. Either one like to offer a rebuttal? You'll have a chance on every question. So the next question, Jason Isaacson, is to begin. Considering the shift to online communication for businesses and education, what steps would you take to ensure internet connectivity for residents of this district and across the state?
That is the important question. When we look at having to do the social distancing to stay at home, I had to up my own internet to make sure it could handle having 5 people on Zoom at the same time with 3 kids doing distance learning. We need to make sure that people understand that the internet is like utility service. It's a right that we should have. We need to make sure that we take care of everybody having that opportunity. And in our district, you know, it's not as dire as we have in greater Minnesota, where there's real broadband issues, right? We have entire school districts where a lot of the kids just don't have reliable internet, so they don't have a choice but to go, which if they got hit with COVID would be a real problem. And so our state needs to fundamentally change the way we view the service of the internet as kind of being a necessity for every home to function. And that has to be our guiding post when we move forward to assess what is the needs or what are the needs in this district, who doesn't have it, how do we make sure it's provided. You know, one thing Mounds View School District does is it provides Chromebooks to every student K through 12, right? They understand not every family is going to have a computer, so they made that happen. I think that as a state, we can take an initiative to make sure that everybody that needs the internet has the internet and is able to use the internet to function, whether it's for a job, education, or even entertainment. So I'm really focused on that as a possibility. To really understand that, we'd have to assess where are we at with that in our district. And I imagine from what I've seen, our district isn't nearly as hard off as a lot of greater Minnesota districts, and that has to become a real focus for us.
Thank you. Now, Ben Schwanke.
You know, I think he hit on quite a few actually really good points as he was talking through. And first, like he's saying, it's an inequity throughout the state. Certain parts of the state have great access to multiple different carriers of internet. Other states, other parts of the state don't even really have one carrier to really reach out to be able to get internet. And so the biggest part that I think Senator Isaacson said is we need to first assess where we're at. I think that's something that we have not done a good job at pretty much with most of our programs, of really assessing, are they doing the function that they're meant to do? And so that's where I definitely think we need to start and then make sure we're forming the partnerships to be able to make it happen. As he pointed out, you know, the school districts have already been at the forefront of this even before COVID happened. They've been working at getting different electronic devices, depending on what their district uses, to all students, not students who just have the internet capability, but then looking at providing them hotspots in other different areas. And the school districts have already partnered with different companies in order to make that happen. And so I don't necessarily see us needing a full drastic overhaul. I think we need to first assess where we're at and then form the right partnerships to make the ends meet. Now, if we find out through that assessment that this need is much greater than what we thought, then once again, I think we need to go back and continue that plan. And that's really, once again, where I'm talking about with changing the conversation. It's continuing to assess the problems that we have and keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And then you will begin the next question, Ben. What are some steps the state should take to address the racial disparities we see across the state?
You know, that one's going to be hard to fit in about a minute question here. I'll try and do my best to quickly narrow down on that. First and foremost, I think we need to narrow down on what is driving it. And we hear a lot of the different systemic racism and where is that coming from? Where is it starting from? How do we deal with it? And I think that's where we first need to start. And I think we need to first start with education. Education for me, and I firmly believe this is why I became a teacher. If we don't have strong and successful education, then we don't have a strong economy. We don't have infrastructure. We don't have good healthcare. And so for me, it is first looking at the schools and seeing how can we close those opportunity gaps and really diving in deep. The main thing that I've seen in the schools that we are missing is really taking a focus on making sure that we close the gap and not just say we're going to. too much of what the state has done is given us more paperwork as teachers to be able to do this. And this is where I believe the state actually has to get out of the way of the local communities making the good progress that a lot of them have been. And so I think they need to get out of the way of the teachers and allow them to teach and really make connections with their students instead of having them do paperwork for accountability. Instead, we all know what the numbers are, and we need to make sure that everybody gets the best education that they can.
Thank you. Jason Isaacson.
Well, thank you. And first of all, I think that it would be really good for the GOP caucus to hear what Ben has to say, because he's exactly right, and that is not echo what they think. This idea of getting out of the teacher's way is really important, and letting the teachers run their classroom is important. When it comes to racial disparities, I think I would go a step farther than what Ben said. I think we do know, right? What we know is that in places where parents can't make a living wage, we also find there's a correlation with how well their students do in the racial equity gap, period. That's just where it's at. And we've had solutions to that we've been unable to pass because my friends across the aisle don't want to support transit in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Our district is blessed with tons of Fortune 500 companies and other countries that have companies that want to hire, but there isn't transportation in the northern part of our district, and there isn't any transit, and every attempt we had to get transit through doesn't pass. And if you want to start talking about racial equity, the first thing you need to talk about is just economic equity. Because everybody wants to be a good parent, regardless of their race or anything else. Everybody wants their kids to thrive. Put them in a spot where they're able to make a living wage and pay their bills. They can be home with their kids, and then they can be more successful in that respect, and the kids are more successful. It's a generational thing that's been going on for a while. And it isn't really a secret, right? We've seen this go on in many locations across the country, and it's no different in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so I hope that if we understand we want to address educational equity, we need to address economic equity to solve that problem. Thanks.
Oh, rebuttals?
You know, I'll just quick add a little bit in here. I think it's really like Senator Isaacson saying, it's really the chicken or the egg, right? It's which has to come first, and until we really start to dive into the problems there and take this seriously and really closing the gaps, I don't know if we're going to know if it's the economic part that has to come first or the education. And maybe it's one that has to come together. And that's where I do believe, once again, that's where we just need to change the conversation and have this conversation at the state capitol, and not just always have the argument about how much money. Because once again, we need to make sure that these programs are having the outcomes that they're supposed to be desired. And then let's push the money there to make sure that they're fully funded to keep thriving.
And if you don't mind, I would, respectfully disagree with Ben in that socioeconomic segregation has always been the forerunner to when we have other kinds of racial inequity. There's no question, it goes back hundreds of years. That's been well documented economically, socially. The reality is that when we put people in a situation that can't be successful and geographically isolate them in certain places, it causes a tax base and an erosion of the fundamental fabric of state programs, their education system, their communities. And that is exactly what's happened in Minnesota, which is why Minnesota is in tough shape. And I'm not going to pick on Ben here because I think both parties are to blame for that, for sure. I know that some of the recent solutions have been held up by my friends across the aisle, but in general, we need to address the economic insecurity, the economic issues as a part of the larger picture along with education if we want to be successful.
Thank you. So for the next question, Jason Isaacson will begin, and if the question is, Governor Walz is pushing for a Minnesota state goal to be carbon-free by 2050. If you are elected, will you support this? Please explain why or why not.
I mean, yes, it's depending on the bill, and it creates a situation where we focus on green jobs and understanding how to have a green economy in a successful way. It would be ridiculous not to. It's ridiculous of our country to continue on blindly as if climate change isn't real. And when I hear my friends across the aisle say that, even in the state Senate here in Minnesota, it boggles my mind. It's been so clear, and the scientists have been so convinced and so unified about this. And so we need to begin thinking about that. Now, is getting it done by 2050 a possibility? That's going to be a hard sell, and it's going to be tough for our state to do that. I think there's a lot of things we have to overcome in that situation, but it is a worthy goal and something we should be striving after. If we don't fix this problem with the economy or the climate, a lot of the other things we're worried about aren't going to be a problem. right? We got to really take this seriously and understand that worldwide, this is a problem for not just America, but for all people of the planet. And we're just simply oftentimes ignoring it. We see a lot of rhetoric where people bring snowballs to the Senate floor at the US Capitol and act like, well, this is here, then climate change isn't real. We have to listen to the scientists, and the scientists have not equivocated. They're very clear about this. And if Minnesota can play a role in that, and not only creating a green economy, but getting us to being to that spot by 2050, I think that's something we need to be striving for every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Schwanke.
You know, this is where a lot of people, when I'm talking with them at the door and stuff, are like, well, how can you care about the environment and be a conservative? Well, to me, being a conservative means we want to conserve the resources we have so that next generations and future people can use them. And so absolutely taking care of our environment, especially here in Minnesota, where we have just the amazing lakes, the amazing parks, the amazing North Woods, all of that, absolutely, I want to conserve. And so I think you put it out there in the question that as a goal for 2050, is that a good idea? Yeah, I think it's absolutely a good idea. And I think the sooner the better that we can continue to make improvements, absolutely, we need to move in that direction. Now, one of the problems is though, is right now, a lot of it is so costly compared to the other stuff. And so when you're polling most people, a lot of them, yes, do want to be involved with the green energy, continue down that movement. And I agree with that. However, we need to make sure that it is at an affordable rate for everybody so that as we move down that path, our lower income and lower socioeconomic families aren't priced out of paying for those bills. And so that's the one thing that when you look at the polls, when people see the sticker shock of how much it costs at this moment, it's a little bit too pricey, but we need to keep moving in that direction. And that's why we need more people like Elon Musk and other companies that continue to be innovative and continue to bring down the cost of the inventions that they make.
Rebuttals? All right. So Ben Schwanke, you'll answer first on this next question. Many Minnesotans rely on employer health care coverage and are losing that coverage due to layoffs. Good health care is crucial during this pandemic. What will you do about this?
You know, this is definitely, as Senator Isaacson pointed out earlier, this is definitely going to be a major issue going forward. We need to continue to be able to help people who are losing their insurance as they come off, and making sure that we do have a public option for them available, and that's at an affordable price. You know, Minnesota has been kind of a forefront of healthcare for years and for decades, whether it's the innovation or the cost of insurance and the care provided to. And so that's where absolutely I'm in favor of the state continuing to be able to have a public option for people, especially who have just been recently laid off, or especially are furloughed because of COVID, that we have something to be able to be there as a safety net for them. And then we need to continue to make sure that we are pushing for affordable healthcare for all, regardless of the circumstances. Two ways that people have shown that we could drastically reduce the cost, therefore also the cost of insurance, is first price transparency, and making sure that you know the cost before, or at least the general cost before you go in. We've seen that be a reduction in healthcare costs already for dermatology, other elective procedures, such as hair loss and laser eyes and stuff like that. So that's where we need to make sure price transparency first, and then also a deductible plan where you also have a savings account with it. So I'm trying to get this in 15 seconds, that matches your deductible. I've seen those work. Numerous employees have them, and that would allow for the care to still be provided at an affordable cost.
Thank you. Jason Isaacson.
What's really unfortunate about this situation, and maybe in the long run, it'll be our wake-up call, is that what the COVID crisis has really done is exacerbated and put a focus on where our inequities and problems with access and costs are in healthcare. You know, I've been on that committee now for 3 years, and it has been nothing but a sobering experience to be on the healthcare committee, to see just not only the problems we have with healthcare, but our inability to wrangle this beast has been really difficult. You know, and I never thought of Obamacare as this panacea that was going to solve our problems. But the reality is until we have an honest conversation about how we're paying for it and how much we're paying and setting the prices, everything else is window dressing. right? And so certainly we should go forward, as Ben had talked about, we should go forward with making sure there's an option for folks so they don't fall through the cracks, because we all know prevention is better than cure. If someone has the insurance, we're going to spend less money up front than we do in the long run, right? And the universal model of healthcare has existed for a long time. It's called the emergency room, which gives you the worst outcomes for the most expensive costs. And it is the worst way for us to operate. And we continue to operate with that kind of cure-based model in our healthcare system. And that's where there needs to be stunning reforms for that, so we can save the money and spend it in the places that it really matters. When it comes to folks that are going to lose their healthcare, we have to absolutely make sure there's an option for them. We have to make sure that we don't allow anybody to slip to the safety net. That should not be a reason for people to go bankrupt or broke. And as a state, we can afford to do that. And I think that should be absolutely one of our priorities.
Okay, rebuttals? All right, we'll go on to the next question, and Jason Isaacson will start. Higher education is a very expensive, but Minnesota needs a well-educated workforce if we are to prosper. How do we as a state make higher education, whatever form it may take, something that everyone can afford?
First thing you need to do is understand that higher education means everything from precision welding to philosophy. Right now, and our state has been for a long time on this four-year college bent, and that has been something that I've been crusading against since my days in the House back in 2013. We absolutely positively have to make higher education, whatever post-secondary options we have, something that we value and push forward, especially in the area of the trades and two-year programs. It doesn't have to be a four-year degree. People can go become an HVAC technician and make very good money and live the American dream just as well as somebody with a four-year degree. So that's the first thing we got to look at. The second thing is we have to ask ourselves, if this is truly a priority, why have we spent the last 20 years defunding it, disinvesting in education, not meeting the needs of our schools, not taking care of our higher education asset preservation situations with buildings? We haven't. And you're absolutely right. I said on the Senate floor last year, 2 years ago, one of the reasons why Minnesota continually ranks in the top 5 of almost every rubric you can judge a state by, according to the US News and World Report, is because 100 years ago or so, we made a decision to really educate our people. We are a very educated populace, which is why we have the best voter turnout, the most nonprofits, and Fortune 500 companies per capita. If we don't reinvest and understand that turn the tide on funding for higher education, we are going to fall backwards. And that is just something our state cannot afford to do. So we have to take a serious look at what our values are and then make some pretty tough choices about how we want to spend our budget. And I think education has to be at the top of the list. As an educator, I can think of nothing more important that we should be investing our money. Thanks.
Thank you. Ben Schwanke.
You know, we're going to probably echo a lot of the same sentiments in this category here, but I think the immediate impact that we can make right away on affordability is already starting through our secondary schools and our post-secondary programs. Here in Mounds View already, you can graduate with a 2-year degree once you graduate from there, and you're already set up then for less years of college no matter what profession you choose. And so that means you're paying for less when you're taking advantage of those opportunities. So first, it's supporting those types of programs for post-secondary options. It's more efficient for both the taxpayer and for the student themselves. And also, as he said, is valuing the trades. That is something we have not done a very good job with as a country for many years. And now we're seeing that where they can't find enough people to hire because there's not enough skilled laborers in that area. And so I'm very proud of my school district in making sure that we're starting more specified programs for like math in the trades, auto mechanic, and other building classes that are out there that we are offering. And with that, then students also don't drop out. And so they're set on that pace in order to continue to go through the higher education field. With that also, I believe it's out there on my website. If not, I'll have to get that up there again. But I firmly believe in a loan forgiveness program of students, especially that come in to Minnesota, use our state-funded institutions. And if they stay X amount of years in Minnesota and contribute to our workforce, that we will forgive at least some of their loans.
Thank you.
I can just add to
Anything
that.
further? Okay.
Yep.
Jason Isaacson?
I'll take that a step further in that I have voted for, supported, and encouraged increased funding to our loan forgiveness program that we have, and will continue to do so. It's been an economic stalling point for us with many college-educated folks with the staggering amount of student loans that they have. And we need to be focused on that. But I want to take one step back also to this idea of when we think about funding education and we think about what our priorities are and we look at what our options are, when we expand the options beyond to the trades, when we expand the options onto just basic technical things, whether it's welding or small engine repair, what we're doing is we're providing a broader quality of life, and really every person coming out of high school has a much better chance of pursuing the American dream, the right to pursue happiness. And I think that that's something that resonates with people. And what's scary about it is that the budget has been used as a political football, and higher education has been getting sacked on a regular basis because people sometimes see they don't see the value in that. And that's something we really need to promote more of. Thanks.
Any more for Ben Schwanke? Okay. We'll go to the next question, and we'll start with Ben Schwanke. Let's see. The legislature recently passed a police reform bill to increase accountability for policing. What are other areas in the criminal justice system that you see requiring reform and which you would prioritize?
You know, this is one where, once again, we need to start with, let's assess. Let's start here. What is going wrong in many different areas, because there are so many different areas that are not working in the way that they are set up and meant to work. And so that's where we first need to start to assess and start to open up with the entire criminal justice system, making sure that it's the public defenders that are being funded correctly and that they have the time to be able to do it, that the jails are operating in the correct way that they're supposed to be doing, and that the police, once again, are also operating the way they're doing. It's such a wide area that we need to assess all parts of our criminal justice system. With that, though, I believe we also need to stop making more criminals out of our own society. We continue to pass law after law, making for more negative interactions between our police and our communities. With all this going on, I continue to dive more into this, and I read that there's been over 3,000 federal laws put into place for criminalization, and they stopped counting them in the late 1980s because there were so many. And so when we have a society that pretty much you can pull somebody over or stop somebody for any reason and you can make one, then that's where we have a problem, where the government doesn't trust its communities, and instead the community shouldn't be trusting its government when they think that way. We need to stop making criminals out of everyday citizens and lessen the negative interactions between police and our community.
Thank you. Jason Isaacson?
Can you repeat the question? I was writing so much down. I want to make sure I got the question right.
The legislature recently passed a police reform bill to increase accountability. What ideas are you going to contribute to that?
Okay, so while I would say that we do need to look at it, there are several clear areas where we already know we need to be doing a lot of reform. Nonviolent offenders and how they're treated by our criminal justice system versus violent offenders. For example, on marijuana charges or other things, understanding the difference between someone who's committing a crime because they're a criminal and somebody who's committing a crime because they're having a mental health issue or an addiction issue. These are very simple ways we can make significant reforms. You know, training police so we don't have issues with racial profiling would be a pretty big deal. I think that'd be really important. Another area is understanding how we treat orphans and wards of the state and protecting our children better than we do right now. I'm offering a bill to absolutely redo the ombudsman when it comes to how we approach orphan children and children that are wards of the state, because right now there isn't enough oversight for those folks. And the last thing I want to say, and I'm not, I mean, we've been pretty good natured, I'm not trying to poke at Ben here, but making a comment like we make criminals out of people who aren't is a really nice soundbite, right? But when you talk about those 3,000 laws, right, we got to talk about examples of what they are. Now, I don't think that he's necessarily wrong. There could be things like that, right? But sound bites aren't how we change policy, right? We change policy because we dive into it and understand where are the laws deficient and where can we make changes and make it better. So I think it's really important to differentiate that. I've given you 3 examples of areas that I'd like to see reform. I think there's multitudes more, but in a minute, 30 seconds, I can only get so much in there. So thanks.
You have time for rebuttals.
Yeah, just real quick on that, like, I think he hit it on the head again. It's hard to put it all into 1 minute and 30 seconds, but I just want to touch also on the base of, like you said, mental health, and a lot of the ways that we do the mental health and nonviolent. And that's where, once again, my whole philosophy, especially with criminal justice, is on a treatment versus criminalization path. We've been doing a lot of different initiatives for many decades, and they aren't working, and we need to drastically think of changing our philosophy. And so that's where we need to first think treatment first, and then what would be the repercussions after. And that's where definitely we need more assessments, and we need to definitely shift our philosophy and our mindset when it comes to public safety.
Anything further? Okay, so Jason Isaacson, you'll begin the next question. What should the legislature do to address affordable housing in District 42?
Well, I think that we have to understand how affordable housing affects whole state and how the suburbs handle it, urban Minnesota and rural Minnesota. In my first year in office, I was the author of the largest single increase in addressing the issue of affordable housing by adding $26 million to the base to really begin that discussion. The problem is that sadly, like many things, it can't keep up with inflation. And so what we're spending money on then doesn't necessarily stretch the dollar now. We need to be taking a look at how do we make sure people have affordable housing on a scaled sense, right? So folks that are earning a certain amount of money are able to get into homes that they can afford, understanding that middle class has some of the same struggles, right? Based on where they're gonna go. For example, Shoreview and the Moundsview area, property values are skyrocketing because everybody wants to be in the Moundsview School District. And that's been something we've been seeing and talking about for quite some time in Shoreview, which then prices people out of being able to move here. And I think that's unacceptable. I think if people want better education for their children and they move here, this is a prime opportunity for them to be able to do that. We have to find a way to make that work within the city government and the local control that they have. And so I think that's something that we're really trying to understand. I've been on the housing committee now more years than not in my time in the legislature. And I can tell you that this particular question is so multifaceted, because you look at better housing for economic reasons, better housing for social reasons, for school board reasons, and then, or being on the school, in the school district, and then looking at across the state, different places have such a variety of needs. It's really tough to fit all this in, as Ben talked about, in a minute, 30 seconds, but that's all I got, I guess. I'm stopping.
Ben Schwanke.
This is where I think everything comes back to balance. And that's, once again, that's pretty much my philosophy with everything. Being a math teacher, I know one side to the right or to the left is too far, right? It's always about coming back to the middle and what can we do to balance. And so that's where I believe the legislature needs to find a balance in our housing crisis, because we absolutely do have one. When you look at our rental rates or our home property values compared to the surrounding states, we are astronomically higher than most of them. And now there's certain pockets of, in parts of each state that, are more affordable, but overwhelmingly our rent is just astronomically through the roof. I was just talking to one of my friends who lives in Minneapolis, where him and his roommate each pay $1,800 a month for an apartment. That's more than I can afford on my teaching salary, and I can't imagine how they live there. And I know that, like Senator Isaacson said, that trickles out from downtown throughout the rest of the suburbs and then into the rural areas. And so we have to look at what is really causing this, and making sure we are striking a balance of making sure we support and fund the areas that we need to be funding, and then also making sure our regulations are the appropriate level of regulations. And that's where we have to, once again, look and find that balance, because not enough regulations is going to lead to unsafe housing, and too much regulations are going to see an increase in price also. And so once again, it's finding that balance of regulation and funding.
Anything further?
Yeah, I think I would just draw the contrast that, I understand and agree in a sense of what Ben is talking about, that balance is important. And I think it's a fundamental thing we can all agree with, right? It's a very interesting and clear point to understand. Having actually been in the trenches and worked on this issue, I can tell you that it's super complex. And we have the Minnesota Housing Authority that handles a lot of the finances that go on with that. And we have counties that have their own specific rules. And we have Shoreview and Roseville and Little Canada have their own rules. And really what it really comes down to is having a dedication of people working together locally, countywide, and statewide, that are really focused on the same thing and making sure that we provide opportunity. And part of it has to do with providing affordable housing, but the other part of it that hasn't been mentioned is providing for an economy in which people can make enough money to afford housing. And that's the other side of it that I want to be looking at. And I would love to have more time to go into that, but we're out of time.
Thank you. Any more, Ben? So Ben Schwanke, you'll begin the next question. Please speak to any concerns or considerations you might have about elder care in Minnesota.
You know, elder care is especially one of my passions in many different facets here in Minnesota. You know, I was lucky enough to have my grandparents in a semi-close area where I could visit them on a decently regular basis. And, you know, I looked at my cousins who lived next to them and was so jealous that they were able to spend as much time as they did with them. And so we need to make sure that first and foremost, Minnesota respects and continues to keep our senior care population in Minnesota first, and making sure that they're not being priced out of their homes that they have built and given to that community, right? They've lived here and they want to retire here, and we need to make sure first and foremost that they're able to continue to retire long after and stay here long after they've originally retired. So first and foremost, that's one of my high priorities, is making sure that the Social Security and pensions continue to last and let our seniors thrive. When it comes to elder care inside, I also believe absolutely that we need to make sure that this is an area where we probably can have more regulation. We need to make sure that we are able to try and stop the elder abuse whenever it is popping up, and do our best that we can to make sure those rules are in place. Hearing the different stories from either friends or family members of the abuse or the care that is happening in some of these facilities is just unacceptable. And the amount of money and trust we are paying these facilities and putting in these facilities is ridiculous to be able to have some of the outcomes that we're having.
Thank you. Jason Isaacson.
I share a lot of what Ben's talking about, and I would invite him to go back to the GOP Senate caucus and ask why they refused to allow licensing for group homes, and they watered down the ability to get people to protect themselves with security cameras. I mean, that's the problem I struggle with in this whole situation, is that there is so much we could do, and there's so much we've been unable to do right now because of the majority I deal with in the Senate. And that's super frustrating for me and super personal. You know, I have parents that are approaching when they're going to be getting elder care. My wife's parents live in the district in a senior home, right? I see this stuff every day. And that is a real personal concern, not beyond just what I see at the legislature. It is our absolute responsibility to provide for an environment in which these folks can be successful and healthy. And so when I propose things in the legislature, like getting rid of the spend down so they don't lose more of their money, or reducing taxes on Social Security or pensions so they can keep more of the money because that pie keeps getting smaller and they get turned back by my friends across the aisle, that's really frustrating. When we talk about licensing elder care, and Senator Housley, who chairs that committee, doesn't get that through the Senate, right? That's really frustrating to me, because that's what we need to change. So when Ben's talking about the dialogue changing, I 100% agree on these issues. We do need to see new dialogue on those issues. And I want to see us take that more seriously, because the reality is that, you know, just like I am on disability services, which is something I'm a huge advocate for, we are absolutely judged by we help those who have the least amount to give to us back. How well do we take care of those people? And right now, I think the state gets an F on that. And that's something that fundamentally needs to change. Thanks.
Anything further on this one? We'll go to the next one, and we'll start with Jason Isaacson. What measures need to be enacted related to gun laws in Minnesota?
So I'm an Orange Star candidate. I have offered several bills that deal with and talk about gun regulation to curb gun violence, to provide more protection. I have led a coalition of senators that attempted to do that 3 years ago and received death threats that had to go to the police because of that. I take this so unbelievably seriously, in the sense that we have such a responsibility to our people to make sure that my kids don't have to worry about guns at the schools, to make sure that when we walk down the street, that's something we don't have to worry about as a part of our daily norms. It's a culture issue, right? And right now, we've got two groups that are fighting this battle. One group happens to support, they are not the Republican Party, but they definitely seem to line up with them more, that really supports some pretty crazy ideas about how gun freedom and gun rights should go. And there's another group that wants common sense legislation that protects people. And that's what I've been focused on. And as an Orange Star candidate, I proudly wear that badge, that I will continue to do that. And if we take the majority in the Senate next year, I will be an author on several bills that talk about closing loopholes, making sure that we have registration of guns, the whole 9 yards we think are important. And so we understand how we can protect our citizens. Excuse me, when I said registration of guns, I want to go back and say universal background checks. That's what I meant to say, just so we're clear about that. And so I want to see those things, red flag laws that protect people in violent situations. We have so much responsibility to that. And I'm 100% committed, which is why I've been on that movement from the very beginning here in my time in the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Schwanke.
You know, I think he hit it right on the head when he said we have a culture problem. And I really think we do, in a sense, past this issue here. You see how partisan things are, how people just aren't treating each other with the humanity that we greatly deserve, and continuing to do that. And so that's where I think we definitely need to make a lot of strides in treating one another with just once again, the humanity, right? Realizing that all of us are human, and we've got to take a deep, hard look at that culture and see what are we doing that this is becoming a bigger problem. Now, having said that, I agree with Senator Isaacson in some ways, and in other ways I do not. But with that, as I agree that first, if we're going to do a plan with this, it needs to make sure that it does not infringe on any constitutional rights, that it is bipartisan, because as he said, we have different groups that seem to not treat each other well, or the people that are going against them in any sort of friendly manner. And so we do need to make sure that we are able to get a coalition of bipartisan support in order to make sure that any law that is enacted is followed through fully with the citizens too. Because it's one thing of getting something passed through the Senate or the House, or a bill becoming law, but it's making sure that Minnesota is okay with it also, and making sure that the citizens are okay with that. And so that's where we need to make sure that we're thoughtful, we're bipartisan, and that it does not infringe on anyone's Second Amendment's right. And just to wrap that one up is also, I'm not exactly in favor of a lot of the red flag laws that we see right now, mainly because of the implementation of them and what we'd be doing to the surrounding communities when the police would go door to door to confiscate guns.
Thank you. Wow. Is there a rebuttal?
I can't not respond to that. I don't know what law he's talking about where police are going door to door to confiscate guns. That's just a inflaming argument there, to be clear. But the important thing is he makes a point that I want to really emphasize, and this idea of the humanity. I'm walking through the Senate halls one day on the office building, and I look up and I see two guys from the Iowa Gun Owners Caucus, two guys bigger than me, and I'm a big man. And these guys had Scott Jensen cornered. And Scott Jensen's a Republican senator who signed onto one of our bills in an attempt to be bipartisan. They had him cornered, and I walked between the two of them. I said, Senator Jensen, could you answer a question about a bill? I'd love to talk with you. Can we walk for a second? And I walked him out of that situation. I didn't have to do that. Scott's on the other side. He causes all kinds of problems. But what I saw there was unacceptable. That was unacceptable behavior. And so this humanity has to extend across the aisle, which is something that I have a history of doing with my friends in the Republican Party. And that's one example where we need to see that better. But the idea of scaring people about police going door to door to pick up guns, I think that's pretty specious.
More rebuttal?
Yeah, I'll quickly respond to that. Absolutely, like you were saying, Senator Isaacson, this needs to extend out the humanity to all groups and all sides. Absolutely, and groups that do that, I will absolutely not stand by them. And so I'm glad that you did that also. And so I think this is one area that, once again, just we as a state and we as a people throughout the state need to continue to work better in treating each other in that way. So first, thank you for doing that, because like you said, that is something you do not have to do. I just want to quick correct the door-to-door statement. Sorry, I phrased that in the hurry to get that in the seconds. I phrased that wrong. The implementation of not going door-to-door and knocking and confiscating guns and finding out who, but the implementation of if somebody is going through the red flag process of at least the bills that I have seen, and maybe Isaacson is thinking of something else that I have not, is that the police would be the ones to end up having to go to that home, not door-to-door, but to the home to be the one to temporarily seize the weapons. So maybe it might mean, but I mean, that's what I meant. Sorry.
You don't hold by faux pas about gun registration. I won't hold
Thank
your
you
faux pas
both. That's it on guns
Yeah, we're just being
for
silly.
now. The next question, Ben Schwanke will begin. Considering recent events, how would you address racism in the state? And maybe we covered a little bit of that before.
You know, that's once again, that's a hard one to do, but I think we can already kind of talk about from this last question is, there are groups out there that absolutely want to continue to divide us on all sorts of measures, whether it is race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender. There are always groups out there that are absolutely trying to divide our country, our state, and our district. And I absolutely think that this is where we as a community, that is where we can have the biggest impact, is we need to make sure that we are reaching out to our neighbors, getting to know our neighbors, treating people with humanity once again, and calling out racism when we see it. You know, and it's uncomfortable, it's hard, but when we see it, we absolutely need to call it out. You know, that's where I think we are going to be able to make the biggest difference as a society, is once we start to look in our hearts and what are we doing towards it. We may not be the one out there saying different things or pushing an agenda, but are we the ones out there calling out racism when we see it in our everyday lives? And that is just one thing I feel very passionate about. It's a much more extreme version of bullying, but I hate when I see bullying in my class, and I can't stand it. And I make sure that that absolutely is called out right away when we can. And that we also then have a conversation about how does that affect the entire community? And because having some racists in the community affects us all as a community. It's like having that one little virus that's going to eventually spread throughout, and it creates that negativity. And so we need to do better as a community and better as ourselves.
Thank you. Jason Isaacson?
You know, I teach intercultural communication at Century College and other places, and I will tell you that having an understanding of the cultural norms our society was built on, and really getting to this fact of institutional racism, white privilege, and those kind of things is really important. And understanding how we get to that, we know not just the obvious racist stuff, but the latent racist stuff, the hidden stuff we don't talk about as much, right? And there are so many aspects of that in our society that just remain unaccounted for. We have, you know, we see what happened with George Floyd and his murder, but we're not talking about all the times people aren't getting jobs, they're held back, what happens when you have to deal with the kind of roadblocks you do just because of the color of your skin. Racism is a rampant problem in our country. It is a rampant problem even in our state. And it's something that we have a full responsibility to take care of. And how do you legislate that? I'm not sure. That's a tough one, because you're really talking about a cultural and moral issue. And I don't know the legislature can adequately do that. But what we can do as a government is begin to model what that behavior looks like. And oftentimes when we want to see change in our state, the government enacts that change first and then lets that model throughout the culture. And that's how we get a lot of really positive, progressive changes in our state. And that's something that we can be taking on very seriously. I talk a lot about, and I presented at conferences at the Boys and Girls Club of America about racism, and really try to become engaged in that. And despite my pasty white look with a shaved head, I am super passionate about understanding and educating people on the realities of white privilege and systemic racism in our society, because it is absolutely a deal breaker for a lot of folks in America.
Thank you. Anything further? We'll go on, and this will be our last question, and we'll start with Ben Schwanke. No, we'll start with Jason Isaacson.
Sure.
Do I have that right?
I think if you're going to end where, yeah, that's sure. I don't remember. So.
Okay. Do you believe people convicted of felonies who are living in the community should be able to have their right to vote restored?
100%. It's a simple constitutional issue that our country was founded on, right? Taxation without representation. If these folks have paid their debt to society, then they deserve to reenter society and participate in society. We can't reasonably expect folks to want to follow society's rules when they don't have a voice in making it, when they don't have a voice in deciding who their elected official is. You want to know what's crazy? They can get elected to office and vote in the legislature, but they still can't vote for themselves. That's just unacceptable. Right? And so I've been a proponent of that for quite some time. I have good friends in the House and Senate that have been working on that as well, and I will continue to work on that. We need to restore the vote. It is unconscionable as a society that we allow that to continue and then act surprised when there's a high recidivism rate. Unconscionable that we allow that to continue and we act surprised when people aren't engaged in their community anymore. Right? If we want them to be engaged, they have to have the power to do so. And what better way, at least to start the process, is to give them the right to vote. So I'm a little frustrated that we're still dealing with this issue, and I hope that's something we can solve in the next legislative session.
Thank you. Ben Schwanke?
Overall, I'm going to say pretty much exactly what he said here. This is an issue I think that we're both of us pretty much agree on, probably 99% of the thing, probably just how do we do it differently or what's the path to get there. As Senator Isaacson said, when you paid your debt to society and you've done the retribution for whatever mistake you have made, then yes, you should have your constitutional rights fully restored, right? And it's once again, it just goes back for me to treatment versus criminalization. When they were already a criminal, but now how can we treat and help them get back into society? And that's, as he said, it's a cycle, and it's going to continue to cycle until we change our philosophy. And we've got to make sure that, that people do pay their debts if they are causing, a negative harm to our society. But once they've paid their debts and that restorative justice has taken place, then absolutely, we should be able to have, those people should be able to expect to be just like part of the rest of the community and to be able to have their constitutional rights restored.
Anything further? You both said the same thing. I wouldn't have expected rebuttals there. So, well, that's all the time we have for questions. We'll turn to closing statements. And Ben Schwanke, you have the first go at that. You have 1 minute.
Once again, I just want to say thank you to everybody who helped put this on here tonight and took the time. And thank you to Senator Isaacson for taking the time out of your busy schedule too to be here and have this discussion, because I think this discussion is super important. We've shown, I think, in this forum that absolutely different conversations can be had. We can do it in a respectful way. We can talk about one issue and disagree on it, but still be able to find commonality in other parts. And that's what we have to do in order for us to truly be a one Minnesota, like Governor Walsh says, and I believe that we are. But we just have to change the way we are doing things. And if you've heard me throughout the night, I believe we need to just change the philosophy that we have as a government at St. Paul. And a vote for me would be a vote for a strong person who is going to continue to try and change the dialogue, just like Senator Isaacson and I had right here. Because this is the conversation that needs to happen, where we can see that we are both looking for a common goal, but we might have just slightly different paths on how to get there. And until the Senate or the House or our governor can all work together, assuming those good intentions with each other, then we're not going to get anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Isaacson.
Well, first, I want to thank you folks and Ben for your time. I really enjoy that. And I hope you can see that, we joke around, we talk, and we disagree. I'll be honest, when I came to the Capitol, I came there to be a bruiser. And one of the biggest wake-up calls I got in my first year was that most of my best friends were across the aisle. And then I learned about what bipartisan work does and have a long history of doing lots of things for this district on a bipartisan level, pass through the money through a Republican majority, such as the Rice Street Bridge. And then other things I've done, like the quiet zones here in the district, so the trains aren't making lots of noise. And most recently, done with the Republican majority, $62 million for small business relief in our district and across the state. This concept of bipartisanship is so important, and he's right. And I engage in some of the dialogue that goes on, because the reality is that it's a tough world out there. But the truth of the matter is that when you're invested in your community like I am, and I have so many different parts of it that I engage in, there's nothing I'm more passionate about than making sure our community and our state are successful. And so I humbly ask you for your vote, because I believe that our best work is yet to be done ahead of us, and I'm excited to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. And that concludes our forum for candidates in Minnesota Senate District 42, 41. 42.
It's all right.
Thank you, candidates.
Thank
for
you.
coming forward to run and speaking to voters. Thank you to our viewers for watching and for your interest in becoming informed voters. We will put all of our forums on our YouTube channel and also on Roseville's YouTube channel. And you will find links to recordings for all of our candidate forums on League of Women Voters White Bear Lake area website, www.wbla.org. So you can request an absentee ballot now on the Secretary of State's website, mnvotes.org. If you need to register or vote or update your registration, You can also do that online or in person when you go to vote. Finally, make your voice heard in the general election by voting by November 3rd. Thank you.